Marcus Williams glanced at the dashboard clock as he merged onto I-85, heading toward downtown Atlanta. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday night in late September, and he'd been driving for Uber for nearly 6 hours straight. His shift usually ran from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, the busiest and most profitable times for rideshare drivers in Atlanta. Between bar hoppers, restaurant goers, concert attendees, and college students heading to and from parties, weekend nights kept Marcus constantly busy with back-to-back rides. At 34 years old, Marcus had been driving for Uber for 4 years now, ever since he'd been laid off from his job as an IT technician when his company downsized. What had started as a temporary income solution while he searched for another tech job had become his primary employment. The flexibility appealed to him. He could work when he wanted, take days off when needed, and the pay was decent if he worked the right hours in the right areas. Over 4 years, Marcus had completed over 12,000 rides, maintained a 4.94-star rating, and earned status as a diamond-level driver on Uber's tiered system. Marcus took pride in providing good service. His car, a 2019 Toyota Camry, was always immaculately clean. He kept bottled water and phone chargers available for passengers. He was friendly, but not overly chatty, reading passengers' cues about whether they wanted conversation or quiet. He knew the Atlanta metro area intimately, could navigate without relying entirely on GPS, and prided himself on getting passengers to their destinations efficiently and safely. Over 12,000 rides, Marcus had experienced just about everything. Drunk passengers, sick passengers, fighting couples, first dates, breakups, marriage proposals, people crying about job losses or relationship drama, celebrities trying to travel incognito, homeless people using Uber to get to shelters, elderly people going to medical appointments. He'd returned countless forgotten items, phones, wallets, keys, bags, laptops, even a prosthetic leg once. He dealt with difficult passengers who tried to change destinations mid-ride or add unauthorized stops. He'd navigated awkward situations where passengers assumed he wanted to hear their life problems in detail, but in 4 years and 12,000 rides, Marcus had never encountered a situation quite like what he was about to experience. His phone, mounted on the dashboard, chimed with a new ride request. Marcus glanced at the screen while stopped at a red light. The pickup location was an address near Georgia State University campus, about 10 minutes away. The destination was an apartment complex in Midtown Atlanta, about 15 minutes from the pickup point. A relatively short ride, but Saturday night fares had surged pricing, so even short trips were profitable. Marcus accepted the ride and followed the GPS navigation to the pickup address, a residential street lined with older houses that had been converted into student housing near the Georgia State campus. As he pulled up to the specified address, he saw a young woman standing on the sidewalk under a streetlight, illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. She looked up as Marcus's Camry approached, checking the license plate against what her Uber app displayed. Marcus lowered the passenger side window. "Emma," he called out, verifying the passenger name shown in his app. "Yes, that's me," the young woman replied, opening the back door and sliding into the seat behind Marcus. As Emma settled in and buckled her seatbelt, Marcus got a better look at her in his rearview mirror. She appeared to be 19 or 20 years old. The app confirmed she was 19, as passengers had to be at least 18 to use Uber alone. She was petite, maybe 5'3", with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a baggy Georgia State hoodie despite the warm September evening. Her face was pretty but drawn with fatigue or stress, and even in the dim car interior lighting, Marcus noticed she looked like she'd been crying. Slightly puffy eyes, red nose. Heading to the Midtown address, Marcus confirmed, showing her the destination on his phone screen. "Yes, that's right," Emma said quietly, her voice subdued. Marcus pulled away from the curb and began navigating toward Midtown. His default approach was to let passengers dictate whether they wanted conversation or silence, and Emma seemed like she wanted quiet. She sat in the back seat staring out the window, occasionally wiping at her eyes, her body language suggesting someone lost in troubled thoughts. They drove in silence for several minutes, moving through the late-night Atlanta streets. The city was still lively even approaching midnight. Restaurants and bars were full. People walked along sidewalks. Music spilled out from venues. But inside Marcus's car, the atmosphere was heavy with Emma's unspoken sadness. About halfway to the destination, Marcus's instinct to check on passengers' well-being overrode his usual policy of not intruding. "Are you okay back there?" he asked gently, making eye contact with Emma through the rearview mirror. Emma looked up, seemingly surprised to be addressed. "Oh, yeah, I'm fine, just tired. Long day." But her voice cracked slightly on the last words, and she looked away quickly, wiping at her eyes again. Marcus recognized the tone and body language of someone who was decidedly not fine but didn't want to talk about it. He'd had enough passengers over the years to know when to push gently and when to let things be. Something about Emma's demeanor worried him. She didn't just seem sad or tired, she seemed frightened, defeated, trapped. "If you need to talk, I'm a good listener," Marcus offered, "and anything said in this car stays in this car. Driver-passenger confidentiality." He smiled slightly, trying to lighten the moment, while still offering genuine support. Emma managed a weak smile. "Thanks, I appreciate that, but I'm okay really. Just college stress, you know, relationship stuff. It's fine." "Relationship stuff," said with that particular exhausted, scared tone, made Marcus's internal alarm bells ring. He'd picked up his share of people leaving bad dates or fighting with partners, but something about Emma's demeanor suggested something more serious than typical relationship drama. They continued in silence. Marcus wanted to ask more questions, to probe whether Emma was in some kind of danger, but he also didn't want to overstep boundaries or make her uncomfortable. He focused on driving, taking the most efficient route to the Midtown address while keeping half his attention on Emma through the rearview mirror. She continued staring out the window, occasionally checking her phone, then putting it away quickly as if she didn't like what she was seeing. Her hands trembled slightly. She kept pulling the sleeves of her hoodie down over her hands, a nervous gesture that Marcus found concerning. They arrived at the destination, a mid-rise apartment building in Midtown at 12:14 a.m. Marcus pulled up to the entrance, put the car in park and said, "Here we are, safe and sound." "Thank you," Emma said quietly, unbuckling her seatbelt and gathering her small crossbody purse. She opened the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. "Have a good night," Marcus said. "And hey, whatever you're dealing with, I hope it gets better." Emma paused, looking back at Marcus through the open car door. For a moment, she seemed like she wanted to say something significant, but then she just nodded. "Thanks, you too." She closed the door and walked quickly toward the apartment building entrance, not looking back. Marcus marked the ride as complete in his app and was about to pull away when his phone chimed with another ride request. He accepted it and was preparing to navigate to the new pickup location when he noticed something in his back seat. A phone. Emma's phone. It must have slipped out of her pocket or purse when she got out of the car. Marcus sighed. Forgotten phones were common, probably happened once every couple of weeks. The standard procedure was to try to contact the passenger through the Uber app to arrange returning the item. Marcus picked up the phone to see if it was locked, or if he could access a contact screen to try to reach Emma directly. The phone screen lit up as Marcus picked it up, showing a lock screen with a photo of Emma and a young man as the background image. But what immediately captured Marcus's attention weren't the happy couple in the photo, it was the notification banners displayed across the lock screen. There were 17 text message notifications, all from a contact saved as Derek Phone, presumably the young man in the background photo. The most recent messages were visible in the notification preview. "Where are you? Answer me right now. If you don't respond in 5 minutes, I'm coming to find you. You know what happens when you ignore me. I'll find you. I always find you. You're mine. You don't get to just leave." Marcus stared at the phone screen, his stomach knotting with concern. These weren't the messages of a worried boyfriend wondering where his girlfriend was. These were threatening, controlling, possessive messages. The tone was aggressive and frightening. Marcus scrolled up slightly in the notification preview, seeing earlier messages. "If you tell anyone what happened, I'll kill you. You embarrassed me in front of my friends and you'll pay for it. I know where your parents live. Remember that. You're nothing without me. Nothing. Stop crying and get over it. You made me do it." Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. These messages were clearly abusive. This young woman was in a relationship with someone who was threatening, controlling, and potentially violent. The message "you made me do it" suggested physical abuse, blaming the victim for the abuser's violence. Marcus sat in his parked car, Emma's phone in his hand, trying to decide what to do. His first instinct was to take the phone into the apartment building and give it directly to Emma. But what if this Derek person was there? What if returning the phone put Emma in immediate danger by alerting this abusive boyfriend to the fact that someone had seen these messages? Marcus thought about just leaving the phone with the apartment building's front desk, but that seemed inadequate given the severity of what he'd seen. He thought about calling the police, but would they respond to a situation where a rideshare driver saw concerning text messages on a passenger's phone? That seemed like a privacy violation, and what could police even do about threatening text messages? Marcus made a decision. He opened the Uber app and sent a message to Emma through the app's passenger-driver communication feature. "Hi Emma, this is Marcus, your Uber driver. You left your phone in my car. I have it safely. I need to return it to you, but I saw some of the messages on your screen and I'm concerned for your safety. Please let me know the best way to get your phone back to you." Marcus waited, engine idling, watching for a response in the Uber app. Several minutes passed with no reply. Of course Emma didn't have her phone, so she couldn't see the message unless she had the app on another device. Marcus looked at Emma's phone again. The messages from Derek continued to come in. "I'm getting in my car right now. You have 10 minutes to tell me where you are. Don't make me hunt you down, Emma. You know I'll find you. I found you last time, didn't I? That last message was particularly chilling. I found you last time," suggested Emma had tried to get away from Derek before and he'd tracked her down. This wasn't just an unhealthy relationship. This was a dangerous pattern of control, threats and stalking. Marcus made another decision. He pulled out his personal phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? "Hi, my name is Marcus Williams. I'm an Uber driver. I just dropped off a passenger, a young woman named Emma Rodriguez, and she left her phone in my car. When I picked up the phone to try to return it to her, I saw text messages from someone threatening her. The messages suggest she's in an abusive relationship and potentially in danger. I'm not sure what to do, but I felt I needed to report this. Where are you located right now, sir?" Marcus gave the address of the Midtown apartment building where he'd dropped Emma off. "And you said you saw threatening messages on the passenger's phone?" "Yes, messages from someone named Derek, threatening to hurt her, saying he knows where her family lives, saying he's going to come find her, messages blaming her for violence. You made me do it. I'm worried this woman is being abused and stalked by whoever this person is. Stay where you are, sir. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Do not approach the passenger or attempt to return the phone yourself. Wait for the officers and explain the situation to them." "Understood. I'll wait here." Marcus ended the call and sat in his parked car, Emma's phone still in his hand, watching the apartment building entrance. The messages from Derek kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. "Last chance, Emma. I'm driving around campus looking for you. When I find you, you're going to wish you'd just answered me. You can't hide from me." Marcus felt sick reading these messages. This young woman was clearly trapped in a terrifying relationship with someone who was tracking her movements, threatening her, isolating her, and using fear to control her. And she'd been sitting in his car just minutes ago, scared and alone, trying to get away from this person. Within 8 minutes, an Atlanta Police Department patrol car pulled up behind Marcus's Camry, lights flashing. 2 officers approached, a male officer in his 40s and a younger female officer. Marcus rolled down his window as the male officer approached. "Are you Marcus Williams, the Uber driver who called about concerning text messages?" "Yes, sir, that's me. Thank you for responding so quickly. I'm Officer Davis. This is Officer Chen. Can you explain the situation?" Marcus walked the officers through everything, picking up Emma from near Georgia State campus, noticing she seemed upset and frightened during the ride, dropping her off at this apartment building, finding her phone in his back seat, seeing the threatening messages when the screen lit up. "Can I see the phone?" Officer Chen asked. Marcus handed Emma's phone to Officer Chen, who read through the visible messages on the lock screen, her expression growing more concerned with each message. "These are clearly abusive and threatening messages. This looks like an intimate partner violence situation. Did you get any information from the passenger about her situation?" "Not really. She said she was dealing with relationship stuff but didn't elaborate. She seemed scared though, like really frightened, not just regular upset. Her hands were shaking. She kept wiping her eyes like she'd been crying, and she couldn't get away from this building fast enough when I dropped her off." Officer Davis nodded. "We need to make contact with this young woman and do a welfare check. Do you know which apartment she went into?" "No, she just went into the building entrance. I don't know which unit." Officer Chen looked at the apartment building. "This is a large complex. There must be 300 units here. We'll need to figure out which apartment is hers." She pulled out her phone and called the department. "I need someone to run information on an Emma Rodriguez, approximately 19 years old, possible resident of Midtown apartment complex at this address." While Officer Chen worked on identifying Emma's apartment, Officer Davis continued talking to Marcus. "Mr. Williams, I want you to know you did the right thing calling this in. A lot of people would have just dropped the phone at the front desk and moved on with their night, but intimate partner violence can be deadly. If this young woman is being threatened and stalked by an abusive partner, intervention could save her life." "I just felt like something was really wrong," Marcus said. "I've been driving Uber for 4 years, picked up thousands of passengers. You develop a sense for when someone is in trouble versus just having a bad day." Emma seemed terrified. And those messages, Marcus shook his head. Those aren't normal boyfriend texts. That's abuse. Officer Chen finished her phone call. Okay, we've got Emma Rodriguez, age 19, student at Georgia State University. She has a driver's license address listed as an apartment in this building, Unit 4217. Let's go make contact. The officers headed toward the apartment building entrance. Officer Davis turned back to Marcus. Can you wait here for a bit? We may need you to provide a statement or answer more questions. Absolutely. I'll be right here. Marcus watched the officers enter the building and disappear into the lobby. He sat in his car, Emma's phone still displaying the continuing barrage of messages from Derek. The threats were escalating. I'm at your place. Where are you? I know you're hiding from me. Open this door, Emma, or I swear to God, you're making this so much worse for yourself. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Based on these messages, Derek was already at Emma's apartment, pounding on her door, trying to get in. The officers had arrived just in time. Marcus waited anxiously in his car for about 20 minutes. He saw more police vehicles arrive. First one more patrol car, then an unmarked sedan that Marcus guessed was a detective. Officers moved in and out of the building purposefully. Something significant was happening. Finally, Officer Chen emerged from the building and walked over to Marcus's car. Mr. Williams, I want to update you on the situation. When we got to Emma Rodriguez's apartment, we found her boyfriend, Derek Thompson, pounding on her door, shouting threats. Emma was inside, terrified, too afraid to even open the door or call police because Derek had threatened to hurt her family if she contacted authorities. Derek had a key to Emma's apartment that he'd refused to return after their relationship ended. He'd been using that key to come into her apartment whenever he wanted, which is illegal entry. He'd been tracking her phone location, stalking her, threatening her, and based on what Emma told us and some visible injuries we observed, physically abusing her for months. We arrested Derek on scene for stalking, terroristic threats and criminal trespass. He's being taken to county jail. Emma is speaking with a domestic violence advocate right now and will be getting an emergency protective order. Your phone call tonight may have prevented a serious escalation of violence. Derek was extremely agitated and aggressive when we encountered him. If we hadn't been there, if Emma had come home alone to find him at her door. Officer Chen didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. This situation could have turned deadly. Is Emma okay? Marcus asked. Physically, she has some bruises and a healing black eye that she'd been hiding with makeup, but nothing requiring emergency medical attention. Emotionally, she's shaken but relieved. She said she's been trying to leave Derek for weeks, but he wouldn't let her. He kept threatening her family, tracking her location, showing up wherever she went. She felt trapped. Tonight, your call gave her the intervention she needed. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Can I return her phone to her? Actually, we're going to need to keep the phone temporarily as evidence. Those text messages document Derek's threats and harassment, which supports the charges we're filing. We'll photograph all the messages and return the phone to Emma within a few days, but you can come inside briefly if you want. Emma asked if she could thank you personally. Marcus followed Officer Chen into the apartment building and up to the 4th floor. Unit 4217's door was open, with officers moving in and out. Inside, Marcus could see Emma sitting on a couch, wrapped in a blanket, talking to a woman in civilian clothes, who Marcus guessed was the domestic violence advocate Officer Chen had mentioned. When Emma saw Marcus, her eyes widened with recognition. "You're my Uber driver," she said, standing up. "The officers told me you saw the messages and called police. You probably saved my life tonight." Emma's voice broke on the last words, and she started crying. Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd just been trying to do the right thing, trying to help someone who seemed to be in danger. "I'm just glad you're okay," Marcus said. "Those messages were really scary. I couldn't just ignore that. Most people would have, Emma said through her tears. "Most people would have just dropped my phone at the desk downstairs and driven away. But you cared enough to read what you saw, to understand I was in danger, to call for help. Derek was outside my door when the police arrived. If they hadn't been there, if I'd come home alone..." Emma couldn't finish the sentence. The domestic violence advocate, who introduced herself as Michelle Carter, stepped forward. "Mr. Williams, Emma has agreed to cooperate with prosecution of Derek Thompson. Your intervention tonight created the opportunity for that. You witnessed the threats through the text messages. Your 911 call generated the police response that interrupted Derek's harassment and led to his arrest. Emma had been too frightened to call police herself because Derek had threatened her family, but your outside intervention changed everything. What happens now?" Marcus asked. Michelle explained that Emma would be getting an emergency protective order prohibiting Derek from contacting her or coming near her.
Police had confiscated Derek's key to Emma's apartment. Emma's locks would be changed immediately as an additional security measure. Derek was being held on criminal charges and would face prosecution for stalking, terroristic threats and assault based on Emma's disclosure about physical abuse. Emma would be working with victim advocates and possibly relocating to safer housing. Marcus spent another 30 minutes providing a detailed statement to officers about everything he'd observed. Emma's demeanor during the ride, his discovery of the phone, the messages he'd seen, his decision to call 911. His statement would be part of the evidence package used to prosecute Derek. It was after 2 a.m. when Marcus finally left the apartment building and returned to his car. His Uber shift was technically over. He'd planned to stop driving at 2 a.m. anyway. But as he sat in his car processing everything that had happened, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Emma's tear-streaked face and the relief in her eyes when she'd realized help had arrived. Marcus drove home to his apartment in East Atlanta, his mind replaying the evening's events. When he'd accepted that ride request at 11:47 p.m., he'd expected a routine pickup and drop-off, another transaction in his 12,000-plus rides. Instead, he'd stumbled into a domestic violence situation that could have ended in tragedy if he hadn't paid attention to warning signs and acted on his concerns. Over the next several days, Marcus found himself thinking often about Emma. He wondered how she was doing, whether she was safe, whether Derek had made bail and was out of jail. He checked local news but didn't see any reports about the arrest. Domestic violence cases rarely made news unless they resulted in severe injury or death. A week after that Saturday night ride, Marcus received a call from Detective Sarah Mitchell of the Atlanta Police Department's Domestic Violence Unit. Detective Mitchell explained that she was building the prosecution case against Derek Thompson and needed Marcus to provide testimony about what he'd witnessed. "Your observations are crucial to our case," Detective Mitchell explained. "You're an independent third-party witness with no connection to either the victim or the perpetrator. You saw the threatening messages. You called 911 based on legitimate concern for the victim's safety. Your testimony establishes the pattern of threats and harassment that Emma experienced." Marcus agreed to testify and met with Detective Mitchell at the police station to provide a more formal statement. During that meeting, Detective Mitchell shared more context about the situation Marcus had interrupted. Derek Thompson, age 24, was a senior at Georgia State University studying business. He'd been dating Emma Rodriguez, a sophomore studying psychology, for 8 months. For the first few months, the relationship seemed normal. But around month 4, Derek became increasingly controlling and possessive. He started monitoring Emma's phone constantly, demanding to know where she was at all times. He isolated her from friends by creating drama and conflict whenever she spent time with anyone else. He criticized her appearance, her intelligence, her family. He accused her of cheating constantly, despite no evidence. The verbal and emotional abuse escalated for several months before Derek became physically violent. The first physical incident happened about 3 months into the relationship, when Derek shoved Emma during an argument. He apologized profusely afterward, blamed stress from school, promised it would never happen again. But it did happen again, and again. Shoving escalated to slapping, then hitting, then serious assaults that left Emma with bruises, black eyes, and on one occasion, cracked ribs. Emma tried to break up with Derek multiple times, but each time he would threaten to hurt himself, or hurt her family. He said he'd kill himself if she left him, that he couldn't live without her, that she was the only person who understood him. Then in the next breath, he'd say he'd hurt her if she tried to leave, that he knew where her parents lived, that no one would believe her if she told anyone about the abuse. Derek had convinced Emma that leaving was impossible. He tracked her phone location constantly. He showed up at her classes, her work, her apartment at unpredictable times to check on her. He'd taken a key to her apartment and refused to return it. Emma felt completely trapped, under constant surveillance, unable to escape. The night Marcus picked Emma up, she'd been at a friend's house studying. Derek had started texting her, demanding she come to his apartment. When Emma refused, saying she needed to study, Derek became enraged and started sending the threatening messages Marcus had seen. Emma had turned off her location services and called an Uber to get back to her apartment, hoping Derek wouldn't know where she was. But Derek had driven to her apartment and was waiting for her when she got home. If Marcus hadn't found the phone, hadn't seen the messages, hadn't called police, Emma would have walked into her apartment building alone to find Derek waiting for her in an explosive rage. Detective Mitchell believed, based on the escalating pattern of violence and the level of threat in Derek's messages that night, that there was significant risk Derek would have seriously injured or killed Emma. "You interrupted what could have been a domestic violence homicide," Detective Mitchell told Marcus bluntly. Derek was escalating. The threats were becoming more specific and violent. He was losing control. Emma was trying to assert independence by refusing his demands. That's the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship, when the victim tries to leave and the abuser feels their control slipping. Horror at what Emma had been experiencing for months. Relief that his simple decision to call 911 after seeing concerning text messages had prevented potential tragedy. Derek Thompson's case moved through the criminal justice system over the following months. He was charged with aggravated stalking, terroristic threats, simple assault, battery and violation of Georgia's family violence laws. Based on the evidence, Emma's testimony, the documented text messages on her phone, photos of her injuries, Marcus's testimony about what he'd witnessed, the case against Derek was strong. Derek's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution, with Emma's support, refused to offer anything less than significant prison time. The case went to trial 6 months after Marcus's fateful ride. Marcus testified during the trial, explaining to the jury how he'd picked up Emma, noticed she seemed frightened, found her phone, saw the threatening messages, and called police. He described the tone and content of the messages he'd seen, the clear threats, the possessive and controlling language. Emma testified as well, walking the jury through the entire arc of her relationship with Derek, the early charm, the gradual onset of control and isolation, the verbal and emotional abuse, the escalation to physical violence, the constant threats, the pervasive fear. She showed photos of her injuries. She read excerpts from the hundreds of threatening messages Derek had sent her over months.
Derek's defense was that he'd been a devoted boyfriend, that Emma was exaggerating minor relationship conflicts, that the messages were taken out of context, that he'd never intended to actually hurt anyone. The jury didn't believe him. After 3 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Derek Thompson was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with credit for time served awaiting trial. He would be required to complete domestic violence counseling and anger management programs while incarcerated. Upon release, he would be on probation for 10 years, with strict conditions including a permanent protective order prohibiting any contact with Emma. Emma was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She cried, not from sadness but from relief. The man who had terrorized her for months, who had beaten her and threatened her and stalked her, would be in prison for years. She could finally move on with her life without constant fear. After the sentencing, Emma asked to speak with Marcus. They met at a coffee shop near the Georgia State campus, about a year after that Saturday night Uber ride that had changed both their lives. Emma looked different, healthier, happier, more confident. Her hair was shorter, cut in a stylish bob. She wore a Georgia State t-shirt and jeans, no longer covering up with baggy hoodies. She smiled when she saw Marcus, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," Emma said as they sat down with their coffees. "I wanted to tell you in person how grateful I am for what you did. That night, I was so scared. I knew Derek was looking for me. I knew he was angry. I just wanted to get home and lock my door and hope he'd calm down, but he would have been waiting for me. If you hadn't seen those messages and called police, I'm just glad I paid attention," Marcus said. "I'm glad you're okay. You seem like you're doing much better." Emma nodded. "I am. Therapy has helped a lot. Understanding that what Derek did to me wasn't my fault, that I didn't cause his violence, that I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness, that took time to accept. But I'm healing. I'm back to being myself. I'm finishing my degree. I have real friends again, friends Derek can't isolate me from. I'm even dating someone new, a guy who's kind and respectful and never makes me feel afraid. That's wonderful," Marcus said sincerely. "I wanted to ask you something," Emma continued. "I've been working with a domestic violence prevention organization. We do outreach and education about recognizing abuse and helping victims. I want to share my story to help other people, and I wanted to know if you'd be willing to share yours too. To talk about how you recognized warning signs and acted on them, how people in everyday situations can help identify and intervene in domestic violence." Marcus agreed immediately. Over the following months, he and Emma spoke together at several events, college campuses, community organizations, professional groups. They told their story from both perspectives, Emma describing her experience of being trapped in an abusive relationship, Marcus explaining how he'd noticed concerning signs and made the decision to report rather than ignore. Their presentations had impact. After one talk at a rideshare driver training event, 3 drivers approached Marcus to describe similar situations where they'd picked up passengers who seemed to be in distress or fleeing dangerous situations. The drivers had ignored their concerns, assuming it wasn't their business, but after hearing Marcus and Emma's story, they committed to paying more attention and reporting warning signs in the future. After a talk at Georgia State University, multiple students approached Emma to share their own experiences with abusive relationships. Several said they'd been in situations similar to Emma's, but hadn't recognized the abuse as such because they hadn't had a framework for understanding that threats, control, isolation and violence weren't normal parts of relationships. Emma's willingness to share her story helped other students recognize their own situations and seek help. Marcus also worked with Uber and other rideshare companies to develop training for drivers on recognizing signs of human trafficking, domestic violence, and other dangerous situations. The training taught drivers warning signs to watch for, passengers who seem frightened or controlled, threatening messages or calls a passenger receives during a ride, passengers with visible injuries who seem evasive about how they occurred, passengers being picked up or dropped off at unusual locations repeatedly. The training emphasized that drivers shouldn't intervene directly in dangerous situations, but should report concerns to authorities and the rideshare company's safety team. One of the key messages Marcus emphasized was that it's better to report and be wrong than to ignore and allow harm to continue. Over the next few years, Uber and Lyft drivers across the country used the training Marcus helped develop to identify and report dozens of situations involving potential trafficking, domestic violence, child abuse and other crimes. In several documented cases, driver reports led directly to rescues of victims and arrests of perpetrators. A Lyft driver in Chicago noticed a teenage girl who seemed drugged and disoriented, being accompanied by an older man who answered all questions for her and wouldn't let her speak. The driver reported to police, who stopped the vehicle after drop-off and discovered the girl was a runaway who'd been trafficked for prostitution. The man was arrested on human trafficking charges. An Uber driver in Seattle picked up a woman with visible facial bruises who received constant threatening phone calls during the short ride. The driver reported the concerning situation to Uber's safety team, who coordinated with police to conduct a welfare check. The woman was found to be a domestic violence victim, whose partner had been escalating violence. She was connected with shelter services, and her partner was arrested. A rideshare driver in Miami noticed he kept picking up the same elderly man from different locations at odd hours, always being dropped at a check-cashing business, where the man would cash checks and return to a car waiting outside. The driver reported suspected elder financial exploitation. Investigation revealed the elderly man was being controlled by a caregiver who was systematically draining his accounts. The caregiver was arrested, and the elderly man was placed in protective services. Each of these interventions traced back to the training and awareness that Marcus's experience with Emma had helped generate. His decision to pay attention and report what he'd seen had created ripples that extended far beyond one Saturday night ride in Atlanta. Marcus continued driving for Uber, but found new purpose in his work. He wasn't just providing transportation anymore, he was part of a safety network, someone who paid attention to passengers and watched for signs of trouble. He kept his vehicle impeccably clean, not just for good ratings, but because a clean professional environment might make distressed passengers feel safer. He remained friendly and approachable because he wanted passengers to feel comfortable telling him if they needed help. He also kept business cards from domestic violence organizations, human trafficking hotlines, and crisis services in his car, tucked discreetly in the seat back pockets where passengers could take them without having to ask. Several times over the years, he noticed cards missing and hoped that meant someone had taken information they needed. Emma graduated from Georgia State University with her psychology degree and went on to earn a master's in social work, specializing in trauma counseling for domestic violence survivors. She secured a position at the same organization that had helped her after her escape from Derek, the one where Michelle Carter had worked as an advocate that night. "I want to help people the way Michelle helped me that night," Emma explained during her job interview. "I want to be the person who sits with survivors in their worst moments and helps them see that escape is possible, that they can rebuild their lives, that the abuse wasn't their fault, and they deserve better. I understand what they're experiencing because I lived it." Emma's lived experience made her an exceptionally effective counselor. She understood the psychology of abuse, why victims stayed, why they defended their abusers, why they often returned multiple times before leaving permanently. She understood the fear, the shame, the confusion, the trauma bonding that made leaving so difficult. She could sit with survivors and say with complete authenticity, "I know how you feel. I was there, and I got out. You can too." She also understood the practical barriers to leaving: financial dependence, lack of safe housing, fear of the abuser's retaliation, concerns about children, cultural or religious pressures to stay, isolation from support systems. Emma worked with survivors to develop comprehensive safety plans that addressed all these barriers, connecting them with resources like emergency housing, financial assistance, legal advocacy, and long-term counseling.
Over her first 3 years as a domestic violence counselor, Emma worked with over 200 survivors, helping them navigate the complex process of escaping abuse, obtaining protective orders, accessing safe housing, and beginning the healing process. Each survivor she helped was, in a sense, another ripple from that night Marcus had found her phone and called 911. Derek Thompson served 6 years of his 8-year sentence before being released on parole. During his incarceration, he'd been required to complete domestic violence intervention programming. The programs used cognitive behavioral approaches to help abusers recognize their patterns of control and violence, understand the impact on victims, and develop healthier relationship skills. Some participants in these programs genuinely changed their thinking and behavior. Others simply learned what facilitators wanted to hear while maintaining their underlying beliefs about entitlement to control partners. Derek fell into the latter category. He completed the programs because he had to in order to be eligible for parole. He said the right things in group sessions about taking responsibility and respecting partners' autonomy, but privately, he maintained that Emma had overreacted, that the system had been unfair to him, that he was the real victim. Upon release, Derek relocated to another city to start over. The permanent protective order meant he couldn't contact Emma, but he violated it repeatedly, creating fake social media accounts to send her messages, having friends reach out to her on his behalf, even showing up outside her workplace once before being arrested for the violation. Each violation resulted in additional charges and brief returns to custody. The pattern demonstrated that Derek remained dangerous, that his violence and control hadn't been resolved by incarceration and programming. The criminal justice system continued monitoring him closely, documenting each violation, building the case that would eventually result in longer incarceration for persistent refusal to comply with court orders. Emma obtained updated protective orders each time Derek violated the original order. She documented every attempted contact, every threatening message sent through proxies, every violation. She worked with victim advocates and prosecutors to ensure Derek faced consequences for his continued harassment. But the ongoing violations took a psychological toll on Emma. She'd thought Derek's imprisonment would finally give her peace and safety. Instead, she remained hyper-vigilant, always looking over her shoulder, checking her surroundings, worried that Derek would find a way to hurt her despite the legal barriers. "The hardest part is that I never feel completely safe," Emma confided to Marcus during one of their occasional coffee meetups to discuss their advocacy work. "Logically, I know Derek is being monitored. I know I have protective orders. I know he faces serious consequences for violating them. But emotionally, I still feel like that scared 19-year-old girl sitting in your Uber, terrified that Derek was going to find me and hurt me. That fear doesn't just disappear because the legal system says I'm protected." Marcus understood. He'd learned through his advocacy work that trauma from domestic violence lasted long after the physical danger ended. Survivors carried hypervigilance, anxiety, trust issues, and fear for years. Healing wasn't linear, it was a process with setbacks and challenges. "You're doing amazing work helping other survivors," Marcus reminded Emma. "You're using what you survived to make a difference for other people. That takes incredible strength." Emma smiled slightly. "Helping others helps me too. When I sit with a survivor and help them develop a safety plan, help them understand they deserve better, help them find the courage to leave, I'm also reminding myself of those same truths. Every survivor I help is a testament to the fact that Derek didn't destroy me. He tried to, but I'm still here, I'm thriving, and I'm using my experience to help others survive their Dereks." 5 years after that Saturday night Uber ride, Marcus and Emma were invited to speak at a national conference on domestic violence prevention in Washington, D.C. The conference brought together advocates, law enforcement, healthcare providers, social workers, and policymakers to discuss strategies for preventing and responding to intimate partner violence. Marcus and Emma's presentation, titled "Everyday Vigilance: How a Rideshare Driver's Observation Saved a Life," was one of the most well-attended sessions of the conference. They walked the audience through their story, then facilitated a discussion about how people in everyday situations, drivers, cashiers, teachers, neighbors, co-workers, could recognize warning signs of domestic violence and intervene appropriately. "The key is understanding that you don't need certainty to act," Marcus explained to the audience. "I wasn't certain Emma was in danger when I saw those text messages. I could have been wrong. Maybe it was some kind of weird relationship dynamic that was actually consensual. Maybe the messages were taken out of context somehow. But the potential harm of ignoring a genuine danger far outweighed the minor awkwardness of reporting something that might turn out to be nothing. When you see warning signs, trust your instincts and report to people trained to investigate." Emma addressed the audience as well. "As a survivor, I want you to know that victims are often unable to ask for help directly. Derek had threatened to hurt my family if I told anyone about the abuse. He monitored my phone constantly. He tracked my location. I couldn't call police or reach out to domestic violence services without risking retaliation. I felt completely trapped. But when Marcus, a stranger with no connection to my situation, saw those threatening messages and called 911, it created an intervention that I couldn't create for myself. Sometimes victims need outside people to notice what's happening and act on their behalf. During the Q&A session, an audience member who worked for a taxi company asked, "How do we balance respecting passenger privacy with being vigilant for signs of danger? Aren't we violating privacy by looking at their phones or listening to their conversations?" Marcus addressed the question. "I didn't intentionally violate Emma's privacy. I picked up her phone to try to return it to her, and the messages were visible on the lock screen. I didn't unlock her phone or search through her messages. But even if I had needed to look more deeply to find her contact information, I would argue that potential life-saving intervention outweighs privacy concerns. If you genuinely believe someone is in danger, erring on the side of helping them is the right choice." Emma added, "As the survivor in this situation, I'm grateful Marcus looked at my phone. Yes, it was technically my private property with private messages, but those private messages documented that I was being threatened and stalked. Derek was counting on privacy, on the assumption that no one would look, no one would notice, no one would care. Marcus caring enough to pay attention and report what he saw literally saved my life. I'll take that privacy violation any day over being dead." Another audience member, a domestic violence shelter director, asked, "What advice would you give to people who want to help someone they suspect is being abused but aren't sure how to approach the situation?" Emma fielded this question. "First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about someone's relationship or situation, you're probably picking up on real warning signs. Second, approach with compassion, not judgment. Don't ask, "Why don't you just leave?" That question implies the victim is at fault for staying and doesn't understand the complex reasons why leaving is difficult and dangerous. Instead, express concern. "I've noticed some things that worry me. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help?" Third, provide resources without pressure. Give information about domestic violence hotlines, shelters, and services. Then let the person decide when they're ready to access help. Victims often need multiple offers of help before they're able to accept. Don't give up after one attempt. Marcus added, "And remember that for some people, like rideshare drivers or cashiers, or people in brief interactions with potential victims, your role might not be to have a deep conversation about abuse. Your role might simply be to notice warning signs and report to people trained to investigate and intervene. Police, adult protective services, domestic violence hotlines. You don't need to be a counselor or social worker. You just need to be observant and willing to make a phone call." The presentation generated substantial discussion and interest. Multiple attendees approached Marcus and Emma afterward to thank them for sharing their story and to ask follow-up questions about implementing similar awareness training in their communities and organizations. A representative from the National Domestic Violence Hotline asked if Marcus and Emma would be willing to be interviewed for a public awareness campaign about recognizing and responding to intimate partner violence. They agreed, and over the following months, their story was featured in print articles, radio interviews, and a short documentary that was distributed to schools, community organizations, and professional training programs. The documentary, titled "The Phone Left Behind," followed the arc of that Saturday night ride and its aftermath. Marcus noticing Emma's distress, finding her phone, seeing the threatening messages, calling 911, the police response, Derek's arrest, the criminal case, Emma's recovery, and their ongoing advocacy work. The film also featured interviews with Detective Sarah Mitchell, Officer Chen, Michelle Carter, the domestic violence advocate, and several of the survivors Emma had counseled, who agreed to share their stories anonymously. The documentary was powerful and widely viewed. It became required viewing in police academy training on domestic violence response in several states. Rideshare companies incorporated it into driver safety training. Schools used it in health classes to teach students about recognizing abusive relationships. Community organizations showed it at awareness events. Each viewing potentially prevented future violence by educating people about warning signs and appropriate responses. Each viewer who learned to recognize control, threats, isolation, and violence as abuse rather than normal relationship problems was someone who might help a friend, family member, co-worker, or stranger escape a dangerous situation. 10 years after Marcus found Emma's phone in his back seat, they reflected on a decade of impact stemming from one moment of observation and action. Marcus was now 44 years old, still driving part-time for Uber but also working as a safety consultant for rideshare companies, helping them develop and refine protocols for driver training on recognizing dangerous situations. He trained thousands of drivers across multiple companies and cities, spreading the message that rideshare drivers were uniquely positioned to notice and report potential crimes because of their access to passengers in vulnerable situations. When I accepted that ride request at 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday in September, I had no idea it would change my life. Marcus reflected during an interview for a 10-year anniversary article about the case. I was just trying to make money driving people around Atlanta, but that night taught me that my work could be about more than just transportation. I could be part of a safety network. I could pay attention to warning signs. I could act on concerns, and those small actions could save lives. Marcus had collected dozens of stories over the years from other drivers who'd used the training he helped develop to identify and report dangerous situations. Each story represented someone helped, someone protected, someone saved. Marcus kept a folder with these stories, letters and emails from survivors, thanking him for the training that helped their drivers recognize their situations, from law enforcement, thanking him for driver reports that led to arrests, from drivers describing how the training gave them confidence to trust their instincts and report concerns. Emma was now 29 years old, a licensed clinical social worker and the director of survivor services at a major domestic violence organization in Atlanta. She supervised a team of counselors and advocates who worked with hundreds of survivors annually, providing counseling, safety planning, legal advocacy, and connections to resources. That night in Marcus's Uber, I thought my life was over, Emma said in the same anniversary interview. I thought I'd never escape Derek, that I'd spend the rest of my life in fear and under his control. But Marcus saw messages he wasn't supposed to see and cared enough to call 911. That phone call started a chain of events that saved my life, put Derek in prison, and ultimately led me to the career I have now, helping other survivors. I've now worked with over 700 domestic violence survivors. Each person I help represents another ripple from that night. Marcus saved me, and I'm using what I learned from being saved to save others. That's how change happens. One person helping another, who helps another, who helps another. 10 years later, the ripples from Marcus's observation are still spreading. The 10th anniversary article was published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and picked up by national outlets. It reignited interest in Marcus and Emma's story and led to renewed discussions about the role of bystanders and professionals in identifying and interrupting domestic violence. Several months after the anniversary article, Emma received a Facebook message from a woman named Ashley Peterson. The message read, "You don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. 3 years ago, I was in an abusive relationship. My boyfriend hit me, threatened me, isolated me from my family, tracked my every move. I felt trapped. Then I saw a video of you and Marcus Williams talking about domestic violence, and I realized that's what's happening to me. Your story gave me the framework to understand my situation wasn't normal. It gave me courage to reach out for help. I called the domestic violence hotline. I left my abuser. I rebuilt my life. I'm safe now. Thank you for sharing your story. It saved my life." Emma cried reading the message. She forwarded it to Marcus with a note. "This is why we keep telling our story. Every time we share what happened, we potentially reach someone who needs to hear it. Ashley was that someone. How many other Ashleys are out there that we've reached without knowing?" Marcus responded, "Probably more than we'll ever know. That's the thing about ripples. You can't always see where they go or what they touch, but you know they're spreading outward, creating change." Emma and Marcus continued their advocacy work, speaking at events, training professionals, sharing their story in interviews and documentaries. They'd become accidental advocates, thrust into public roles by one extraordinary night, but they embraced those roles because they understood the power of storytelling to educate, inspire, and save lives. They also remained connected to the criminal justice professionals who'd been part of that night. Detective Sarah Mitchell, who'd built the case against Derek Thompson, was now a lieutenant overseeing the entire domestic violence unit for Atlanta Police. Officer Chen, who'd responded to Marcus's 911 call, had been promoted to sergeant and specialized in domestic violence response training for new officers. Michelle Carter, the domestic violence advocate who'd counseled Emma that first night, had become the executive director of the organization where Emma now worked. These professionals had been part of the intervention that saved Emma, and they continued working to save countless other victims. The night Marcus found Emma's phone wasn't exceptional to them. It was one of hundreds of domestic violence cases they'd worked over the years. But it had become exceptional because Marcus and Emma had chosen to share their story publicly, to use their experience as a teaching tool, to advocate for broader awareness and better responses to intimate partner violence. 15 years after that Saturday night Uber ride, Marcus picked up a passenger, a young woman in her early 20s, from an address near Georgia State University for a ride to Midtown Atlanta. As the young woman settled into the back seat, Marcus experienced a strange sense of déjà vu. Same age range as Emma had been, same pickup area, same destination neighborhood, same quiet, subdued demeanor. Marcus didn't say anything immediately, just began the ride. But he watched the young woman in his rearview mirror, paying attention to her body language, her emotional state, whether she seemed distressed or frightened. About halfway through the ride, the young woman's phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming messages. Marcus couldn't see the messages, but he saw the young woman's expression as she read them: fear, resignation, tears forming in her eyes. She turned her phone face down on the seat beside her, as if she couldn't bear to look at it anymore. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked gently, the same question he'd asked Emma 15 years ago. The young woman looked up, surprised. "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her voice was shaky. "Are you sure?" Marcus pressed gently, "Because you seem upset, and I want you to know if you're in some kind of situation where you need help, there are resources available. It's none of my business unless you want it to be my business, but I'm here if you need to talk." The young woman was quiet for a long moment. "Then how did you know?"
I didn't know for sure, Marcus admitted, but I've learned to pay attention to passengers who seem frightened or upset. 15 years ago, I had a passenger in a situation similar to what I'm guessing you might be in. She was being abused and threatened by her boyfriend. She couldn't ask for help because he'd threatened her family, but I noticed warning signs and I called police. She got help. She's safe now. She's thriving, and I've spent 15 years trying to help other people notice warning signs and act on them. I've heard that story, the young woman said slowly. Are you Marcus Williams, the Uber driver who saved that girl Emma? That's me, Marcus confirmed. The young woman started crying. My boyfriend, he's not a good person. He hits me, he threatens me, he tracks my phone. I can't leave because he says he'll hurt my family. I'm so tired of being scared all the time. But I don't know what to do. What's your name? Marcus asked. Jasmine, I know you're scared, but you don't have to stay in this situation. There are people who can help you. Domestic violence advocates, police, shelters where you can stay safely while you figure things out. The woman I helped 15 years ago, Emma, she works for a domestic violence organization now. She helps survivors escape situations like yours. Would you be willing to talk to her? Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. Yes, please, I need help. Marcus pulled over in a safe location and called Emma on his cell phone. He explained the situation briefly. Passenger named Jasmine being abused by her boyfriend, afraid to leave because of threats, needing immediate support and safety planning. Bring her to the office, Emma said immediately. I'm here now. I'll meet with her right away.
Marcus changed the destination in his GPS and drove Jasmine to the domestic violence organization where Emma worked. When they arrived, Emma was waiting at the entrance. She walked up to the car and opened Jasmine's door. Hi, Jasmine. I'm Emma. Marcus told me you might need some help. Why don't you come inside and we can talk about what's going on and what resources are available to help you. Jasmine looked at Marcus. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for caring. That's what I do, Marcus said with a slight smile. Pay attention and help when I can. Jasmine got out of the car and followed Emma into the building. Marcus sat in his car for a moment, processing what had just happened. 15 years after he'd noticed warning signs with Emma, he'd noticed them again with Jasmine. The cycle continued: observation, concern, action, intervention. Each time he helped someone, the ripples spread further. Marcus pulled out his phone and updated his ride status to continue accepting passengers. There were more people out there who needed rides, and maybe among those people were others who needed help. Marcus would keep paying attention, keep watching for warning signs, keep being willing to act when someone was in danger. That's all it took: attention, compassion, willingness to get involved when something seemed wrong. Marcus had learned that 15 years ago on a Saturday night, when a frightened 19-year-old girl left her phone in his back seat, and he saw messages that revealed she was trapped in a relationship with someone threatening to kill her. He'd learned it through 4 years of advocacy work with Emma, training thousands of drivers, sharing their story hundreds of times, and now, 15 years later, he'd used those lessons to help Jasmine. Tomorrow maybe it would be someone else, or maybe another driver who'd taken Marcus's training would notice warning signs and act. Maybe a cashier who'd seen the documentary would recognize abuse and report it. Maybe a teacher who'd attended one of Emma's presentations would identify a student in danger and intervene. The ripples continued spreading, touching lives in ways Marcus and Emma would never fully know. But they knew this: that Saturday night 15 years ago, Marcus had made a choice to pay attention and act on his concerns. That choice had saved Emma. Emma had used her survival to help hundreds of other survivors. Those survivors went on to rebuild their lives, have families, pursue careers, help others. One observation, one phone call, 15 years of ripples spreading outward, creating change, saving lives, inspiring vigilance. That was always enough, more than enough, everything. Marcus put his car in drive and pulled away from the curb, ready for the next ride, ready to pay attention, ready to help whoever might need him.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.